But here to discuss from the city and county of San Francisco, Homeless Court, Steve Binder and Andre Simpson.
Thank you. We are from San Diego, however.
San Diego.
Yeah, it's San Francisco.
That's also in California.
It's
Well,
in
my
California.
program says San Francisco.
That's okay.
Well,
It's
the
wandering
typo.
around. So Susan got you in here.
No, they did it on their own.
Okay.
Shall we start?
Fine. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I will take this time to explain how the Homeless Court program affects the lives of its participants and the community. The Homeless Court program is a special Superior Court session held at local shelters for homeless defendants to resolve outstanding misdemeanor cases. Shelter community rooms with a podium, fold-out tables, and chairs are home to justice. In 1989, San Diego started the first homeless court program in the nation. The Homeless Court responded to a survey where 1 in 5 homeless veterans requested help with outstanding warrants, more than double the request for any other service. To counteract the effect of criminal cases pushing homeless people further outside of society, the Homeless Court combines a progressive plea bargain system, alternative sentencing structure, proof of program activities to address a full range of misdemeanor offenses. Many homeless people are used to custody as the only option available to them. There are news stories of people committing crimes wanting to be arrested and sheltered in custody where they will receive food and safety. They've given up on themselves. The Homeless Court participants are already actively involved and vested in a program. They're afraid of losing the things they've accomplished individually. During one session, I counseled my clients at the defense table. I then moved over to the prosecution side of the room with their advocacy letters to review them and negotiate further with the prosecutor. Afterward, I looked up to find everyone who had been sitting on my side of the room had moved over to the prosecution side of the room to listen to the negotiations. Our clients feared losing their home at the shelter. They had a future and they didn't want to miss it. They might be living in a shelter, but they were no longer on the streets. They had plans and did not want them interrupted. The Homeless Court program provided them an opportunity to come clean once their cases were resolved. The alternative sentencing structure includes life skills, chemical dependency, NAAA meetings, computer or literacy training, job training or searching for employment, counseling, and volunteer work. The court agreement of no custody acknowledges the participants' efforts in their program activities to satisfy court requirements. In 2003, 574 participants resolved 918 cases, though numbers only tell part of the story. The Homeless Court program provides access to court for homeless defendants working with shelter services, holding proceedings in shelter community rooms, and recognizing individual efforts for purposes of sentencing. The Homeless Court program's greatest achievement is the contribution of shelter agencies and homeless participants, building a more inclusive criminal justice system and stronger community. The Homeless Court program is a community working together, finding opportunity in adversity. In short, the Homeless Court program brings law to the streets, the court to the shelter, and homeless people back into society.
Now I will tell you a little bit about how alternative sentencing is applied. Vietnam Veterans of San Diego is an 88-bed, 3-phase, 1-year comprehensive residential treatment program. Once a client enters VVSD, he or she settles into a dormitory-style environment similar to that of boot camp. This method relieves the isolation of the streets while fostering socialization, which is critical to maintain sobriety. In Phase 1, each client's day is filled focusing on their substance abuse issues, such as understanding the process of addiction and relapse prevention. In addition to the substance abuse classes, clients attend home groups, meditation, one-on-one case management, as well as individual therapy. Homeless Court participants are eligible after successfully completing a minimum of 30 days active participation in Phase 1. However, our participants usually have 60 days of program completion prior to appearing in court. Their efforts are reflected in the advocacy letters, which states the individual's date of entry into the program, level of participation, as well as significant accomplishments. I would like to share with you the story of John, an individual who accessed the homeless court program while residing at VVSD. John, a 64-year-old combat Marine with an honorable discharge, married and divorced twice, unemployed, addicted to alcohol, and homeless. John acquired many citations such as camping in public and open containers of alcohol. He entered VVSD and became eligible for the homeless court, where he successfully addressed his legal issues. I asked John why he had not addressed his legal issues earlier, and his response, because I lacked the funds to pay the fines, I was afraid to go to court, fearful that I would be incarcerated. I wanted to address them, but I was just scared. As a result of our efforts, John obtained gainful employment and transitioned into permanent residency. John's story illustrates the trust developed with Vietnam Veterans of San Diego, as with other shelters and participants, transfers to the courts to help homeless participants move from the streets through the shelters to self-sufficiency.
All right, good. Thank you very much. Questions? Ed?
Your last sentence about John and how his participation in the homeless court enabled him to sort out his problems and move towards self-sufficiency. I'm not sure I saw in your narrative data on the relationship between participation in that program and movement toward self-sufficiency, that is, toward getting employment and so on. Can you help me understand more clearly what the measurable outcomes of the program are?
Simply, in one level, it's resolving the cases, because VVSD, St. Vincent de Paul Village, and a host of other service agencies that feed into the homeless court program can do all their work, get someone on their feet into an apartment or employment, but if they're later picked up on a warrant or a case, they're incarcerated. They then have to go back to the streets because they've lost their job and their apartment, and or use the precious resources that the shelters have and start again from scratch, working their way toward self-sufficiency. So that's one level. Another level is that the clients, when they otherwise go to court in the traditional hearing, either stand before a judge, are told you have to pay a $100 fine, $300, $500, whatever, and they start patting their pockets. I left my checkbook at home. Some are otherwise thrown into custody. They spend the weekend, a week, a month, whatever, but when they're let out of custody, they're no better off afterwards than they went in. So when we have someone who's successfully resolved their cases and moved on through a program, they are situated as productive citizens in the community.
David?
I want to follow up on that. You know, I think the reason Andre closed the way he did with the story about John is that's the kind of outcome we all would like. This is about people getting their lives together. But it's clear from the write-ups that you haven't built in measurement of those kinds of outcomes. And I guess my question is why? Is it too difficult with this population, or is it something you haven't been able to afford? Or, I mean, it would be real useful to us to have that data to understand really what long-term impact this is having on people's lives.
We can go to the Sandag evaluation. It was a Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance grant that we had. They did a short study, and they were able to determine there was an 18% recidivism rate, which is very low compared to the traditional court proceedings. It is very difficult to track people because once they're on their way and living independently, they usually don't look back.
Let's see, Susan and Carl.
I just want to make sure I understand. I mean, getting rid of the warrants is a hook. Is that correct? To get the clients to clean up their lives, and I mean in a way, they have a problem. The outstanding warrants. They don't want to get into the court system, as you said, because they don't know. They're afraid. They don't know what's going to happen. But they understand that they can get rid of the warrants if they do certain things. That's what you started out saying, or does it work the other way? I'm not clear on how it works in that sense.
Go ahead.
The clients are actually, by the time the warrants are cleared up, the clients have already exceeded probably the expectations of the court if they had gone to a traditional court
Okay.
setting. So, yes, it's a hook, but no, it's not the draw for the homeless court program for the clients to voluntarily
Well,
enroll.
then how does this differ from other programs like this? Because that's, innovation is important to us.
So what happens, most people think of community courts when they think of such operations. Community courts such as the Midtown Project get their clients from the police, from the prosecutions, from the courts. Our innovation is it comes from the programs. You have to go through any number of shelters in the city of San Diego, or, as it's been replicated across the state and nation, through other programs to get into the court system. So individuals have to prove themselves in some degree, having completed phase 1 of the program, a certain class, a certain amount of meetings, in order to be admitted, that entry-level criteria, to sign up for the homeless court program. Because essentially what Vietnam Veterans of San Diego is doing is they're saying we're going to stand beside you in court, whether it's through an advocacy letter or many times Andre's always there in court. And they will say, if the judge has questions, feel free to ask me. And so there's that aspect to it, but there's also another aspect. In the traditional court setting, most folks with public disturbance offenses end up in custody. They might spend the weekend or maybe a week in custody. That's credited against a fine $50 a night in custody. So if someone has a $300 fine, 6 days in custody, credit for time served, you're back out on the streets, you're still homeless. They've been in the program for VVSD for 30 days just to sign up, an additional 30 days on top of that. If you were to break
If you
that
could
down
wrap up, please.
monetarily, that's $1,500 just for a month. That's how much more is done through the programs.